The invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock, embossed with gold lettering that caught the light in Catherine Morrison's penthouse office. The annual Children's Hospital Benefit Gala, it read, honoring our medical heroes. Catherine had been planning this event for 8 months. As head of the hospital's board of directors, she understood the importance of presentation, of maintaining the dignity and prestige that encouraged wealthy donors to open their checkbooks. Everything had to be perfect: the flowers, the menu, the guest list carefully curated to include only the most distinguished physicians, prominent donors, and community leaders. At 61, Catherine had spent her entire career in healthcare administration, building a reputation for excellence and attention to detail. She believed deeply in the hospital's mission, had poured her heart and considerable resources into making it the finest pediatric facility in the state. This gala would raise nearly $2 million for new equipment and expanded services, which was why the phone call from the catering manager 3 days before the event sent her into controlled panic. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Morrison, but there's been a mix-up with the guest list. We have someone named Miguel Ramirez confirmed for the gala, but when I called to verify dietary restrictions, he said he works in maintenance at the hospital." "I think there's been an error." Catherine's jaw tightened. This was exactly the kind of oversight that could derail months of careful planning. "I'll handle it personally," she said, already reaching for her keys. Miguel Ramirez was restocking supply closets on the 3rd floor when Catherine found him. At 54, he moved with the efficient quiet of someone who had learned to be invisible in places where his presence might be questioned. He'd worked at Children's Memorial for 12 years, arriving before dawn and staying until the corridors gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Excuse me, are you Miguel Ramirez?" Miguel looked up from his cleaning cart, immediately recognizing the woman who occasionally swept through the hospital in expensive suits, always surrounded by administrators taking notes. Mrs. Morrison, the board chairwoman. He'd never spoken to her directly, but he knew her reputation for demanding excellence. "Yes, ma'am. Is there something wrong?" Catherine softened her voice, trying to handle this delicately. The man seemed kind enough, probably a hard worker. "But there were protocols, appearances to maintain. Mr. Ramirez, I believe there's been a mistake with our gala invitations. Somehow your name was added to the guest list, but the event is really intended for our medical staff and major donors. I'm sure you understand." Miguel's face remained neutral, but Catherine caught something in his eyes. Not anger or disappointment, but a quiet sadness that made her feel unexpectedly uncomfortable. "Of course, Mrs. Morrison, I understand. Must have been a computer error or something." He turned back to his supply closet, and Catherine felt a strange urge to explain further. "It's not personal, you understand. It's just that the event has a very specific purpose, and we need to maintain a certain atmosphere for our donors." "I understand," Miguel repeated softly. "You need to protect the people who matter." Catherine returned to her office feeling oddly unsettled. She'd handled the situation professionally, prevented a potential embarrassment. So why did Miguel's quiet acceptance sit so heavily on her chest? She threw herself into final preparations for the gala, reviewing seating charts and approving last-minute menu changes. But throughout the busy afternoon, she found herself thinking about the maintenance worker's expression, the way he'd turned back to his work without protest or explanation. That evening, as Catherine worked late in her office, she heard the soft sound of wheels in the corridor outside. Miguel appeared, pushing his cleaning cart, moving with the same methodical care she'd observed that morning. "Working late, Mrs. Morrison?" he asked politely as he emptied her wastebasket. "The gala is tomorrow night. Last-minute details." Miguel nodded. "It's important work what you do. The fundraising. The hospital needs people who can bring in the resources." Something in his tone made Catherine look up from her paperwork. "You sound like you speak from experience." Miguel paused in his cleaning, and for a moment Catherine thought he might say something more. Instead, he simply nodded toward the framed photographs on her credenza, pictures of Catherine at various hospital events, ribbon cuttings, award ceremonies. "You've done a lot for this place," he said quietly. "The children are lucky to have someone fighting for them." After he left, Catherine stared at those photographs for a long time, remembering why she'd gotten into healthcare administration in the first place. It hadn't been about galas and donor events. It had been about something much more personal. The gala was everything Catherine had envisioned. The ballroom of the Grand Marquis Hotel sparkled with crystal and candlelight. Distinguished guests in elegant attire mingled over cocktails, their conversations a perfect blend of social pleasantries and serious discussion about the hospital's expansion plans. Dr. Patricia Chen, the hospital's chief of pediatric surgery, was delivering the keynote address when Catherine noticed him. Miguel Ramirez stood near the service entrance, not in his usual maintenance uniform, but in a simple black suit that was clearly his best, pressed carefully but showing its age around the cuffs. He wasn't trying to blend in with the guests. He was simply standing quietly by the wall, listening to Dr. Chen's speech with the same attention he brought to his work. Catherine felt a surge of irritation. She'd specifically told him the invitation was a mistake. How had he gotten in? She began making her way across the room, prepared to handle this discreetly but firmly, when Dr. Chen's words stopped her in her tracks. Before I continue, I want to recognize someone special who's here tonight. 12 years ago, we had a patient, a little girl named Emma Santos, who came to us with acute appendicitis that had progressed to sepsis. Her condition was critical, and frankly, we weren't sure we'd be able to save her. Catherine froze, her attention now completely focused on the podium. It was nearly midnight when one of our maintenance staff noticed that Emma's IV had infiltrated, causing dangerous swelling that the overnight nurse hadn't yet discovered. That maintenance worker didn't just report it. He stayed with Emma, monitoring her condition and advocating for her care until our surgical team could stabilize her. Dr. Chen paused, scanning the room. That little girl is now a healthy 12-year-old who wants to be a doctor herself someday, and the maintenance worker who helped save her life is here tonight. Miguel Ramirez, would you please stand? Catherine felt the world shift beneath her feet as applause filled the ballroom. Miguel remained standing by the wall, acknowledging the recognition with a simple nod, his face showing the same quiet dignity she'd seen in the hospital corridor. Dr. Chen continued, Miguel embodies everything we value at Children's Memorial. He doesn't just clean our halls, he cares for our patients, watches over our children, and reminds us all that healing is the responsibility of everyone who walks through our doors. The applause continued, but Catherine barely heard it. Memories were flooding back, pieces clicking into place with devastating clarity. 12 years ago, Emma Santos. Catherine remembered that night now, remembered the emergency board meeting called to review a near-catastrophic case where a maintenance worker had, what had the incident report said? Had exceeded his authority by intervening in patient care? There had been discussion about disciplinary action, concerns about liability, questions about proper protocols. Catherine had argued that the hospital couldn't allow non-medical staff to make decisions about patient care, regardless of the outcome. But the little girl had lived. The lawsuit that everyone feared never materialized, and in the end, the incident had been quietly filed away. The maintenance worker given a mild reprimand about following proper channels. Catherine had never connected that incident report with the quiet man. She just humiliated about a gala invitation. After the formal program ended, Catherine found Miguel on the hotel's terrace looking out over the city lights. He'd stepped outside during the cocktail hour that followed Dr. Chen's speech, away from the conversations and congratulations that made him uncomfortable. Miguel. Catherine's voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. He turned, unsurprised to see her. Mrs. Morrison, it was a beautiful event. Dr. Chen's speech was very kind. I remember now, Catherine said quietly. Emma Santos, 12 years ago. You saved that little girl's life. Miguel nodded slowly. She was so small, so scared. Her parents were in the waiting room, and the night was so quiet I could hear her crying from down the hall. When I went to check on her, I saw her hand was swelling up like a balloon from that IV. He paused, remembering. I tried to find a nurse, but they were all busy with another emergency. So I stayed with her, kept her calm, watched her breathing. When her color started changing, I knew I had to push the call button and keep pushing until someone came. Catherine felt tears threatening. The incident report said you interfered with medical protocol. Maybe I did. but she needed someone to notice. Someone to care enough to make noise when things weren't right. They stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the gala muted behind them. "Why didn't you tell me?" Catherine asked. "This morning, when I uninvited you, why didn't you explain who you were?" Miguel's smile was gentle but sad. Would it have mattered? "You said the event was for people who matter, people who make a difference. I'm just the guy who empties trash cans and mops floors." "No," Catherine said firmly. "No, you're not." The next Monday morning, Catherine arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. She found Miguel in the pediatric wing, restocking hand sanitizer dispensers with his characteristic attention to detail. "Miguel, could I speak with you for a moment?" She led him to the family lounge, a comfortable space where parents could rest during long vigils with their children. Catherine had funded the renovation of this room 2 years ago, but she realized she'd never actually sat in it before. "I owe you an apology," she began. "Not just for the gala invitation, but for 12 years of not seeing you clearly." Miguel started to speak, but Catherine held up her hand. "Let me finish. When Emma Santos's case was reviewed, I was the one who argued for disciplinary action. I was so focused on protocol and liability that I couldn't see past the rules to recognize heroism." She pulled out a folder she'd been carrying. "I've been reading your employment file, 12 years of perfect evaluations. Commendations from nursing staff for your attention to patient needs. 3 separate incidents where you identified safety hazards before anyone else noticed them. And Emma Santos, just one of several times you've gone above and beyond to ensure patient welfare." Miguel listened quietly, his weathered hands folded in his lap. "I've spent my career building systems and raising money and managing boards," Catherine continued. "Important work, but removed from why we're really here. You've spent 12 years in these halls, watching over our most vulnerable patients, being present in ways that can't be measured in spreadsheets or annual reports." She opened the folder. "I'm recommending you for our Employee Excellence Award. It comes with a significant salary increase and recognition at next year's gala, where you'll be seated at the head table as our guest of honor." 6 months later, at the next annual gala, Catherine stood at the podium looking out over an audience that looked slightly different from previous years. Still elegant, still distinguished, but now including hospital staff from every department, nurses and orderlies, therapists and technicians, administrative assistants, and yes, maintenance workers. "This year," Catherine announced, "we're expanding our definition of medical heroes, because healing doesn't happen just in operating rooms or examination chairs. It happens in quiet corridors at midnight, in family lounges where someone offers comfort to a worried parent, in the countless small acts of caring that make our hospital not just a place of medical excellence, but a place of hope." She found Miguel in the audience, sitting with his wife Maria and his daughter Carmen, who was now studying nursing at the State University on a scholarship funded by the Children's Memorial Foundation. Our Employee Excellence Award winner embodies this understanding. "Miguel Ramirez has spent 12 years not just maintaining our building, but maintaining our values. He's reminded us that the most sophisticated medical equipment in the world means nothing without the human heart that notices when something is wrong and cares enough to act." The applause was thunderous, but Catherine noticed that Miguel's expression remained humble, slightly overwhelmed by the attention. Later, during the cocktail hour, Catherine found herself in conversation with Dr. Chen and several other physicians. "You know," Dr. Chen said quietly, "Miguel told me something interesting the other night. He said that when he first started working here, he was intimidated by all the medical degrees and titles. But his daughter Carmen, she was about 8 then, told him that doctors take care of people's bodies, but he takes care of the whole place that helps people get better." Dr. Chen smiled. "Out of the mouths of babes, right? That little girl understood something it took the rest of us years to figure out." 3 years later, Catherine announced her retirement from the board chairmanship. Her final act was to establish the Miguel Ramirez Patient Advocacy Program, which trained all hospital employees, regardless of their role, to recognize signs of patient distress and know how to respond appropriately. The program became a model for hospitals nationwide. built on the understanding that healing is a team effort that includes everyone who enters a patient's world. On her last day, Catherine made her final rounds through the hospital, stopping at each department to say goodbye. She found Miguel in the pediatric wing, as she'd known she would, carefully cleaning the family lounge where she'd first truly apologized to him. "Any regrets?" Miguel asked, looking up from his work. Catherine looked around the bright, cheerful space filled with toys and comfortable chairs, at the walls covered with thank you cards from grateful families, at the windows that looked out over the garden where children in wheelchairs could watch birds and feel sunshine on their faces. "Just one," she said. "I wish it hadn't taken me so long to understand that the most important question isn't, 'What's your title?' but 'What's in your heart?'" Miguel smiled, returning to his cleaning with the same care he'd always brought to the work. "Time has a way of teaching us what we need to know," he said quietly. "Sometimes we just need to be patient with ourselves while we learn." Catherine nodded. Watching him work, this man who had spent years being invisible while seeing everything, who had saved a little girl's life and never asked for recognition, who had taught her that heroism often wears work clothes and carries a cleaning cart. As she walked toward the hospital entrance for the last time as board chair, Catherine passed the wall where employee recognition photos were displayed. Miguel's Employee Excellence Award portrait hung there, but beside it was something newer, a small plaque that read, "In recognition of all hospital staff who understand that caring is not limited by job description, and that the smallest acts of attention can save lives. Inspired by Miguel Ramirez and dedicated to everyone who chooses to see what others miss." Below it, in Miguel's careful handwriting, someone had added, "For Emma Santos and all the children who teach us that love is the best medicine." Catherine smiled, remembering the gala where she'd tried to uninvite the very person who deserved the most recognition. Sometimes, she thought, the most important lessons come disguised as our biggest mistakes. And sometimes the heroes we're looking for have been right in front of us all along, quietly doing the work that matters most.